Modern day telephone wire is covered in plastic, and so the water doesn't get to it. But in the old days, it wasn't necessarily that way, and so this insulator would help keep the wet wood separated from the wire itself to minimize static and water and electricity don't mix.
Okay. How long this museum is been here since?
It started in, I'm going to say, the late 90s.
Okay.
Was when we started putting it together. It was originally in the basement of a different building, and it was just kind of there just for nostalgia reasons. The company at the time was having open houses periodically, and a lot of people really liked it. So we hired a couple of guys and built this thing. It took them quite a while to put everything together.
Now, the one thing about it is it's very labor intensive.
Okay.
So if you look, all these are contacts all through here. They all have to be cleaned. And these relays all have to be adjusted. And when I'm coming up, sometimes those cords are moving all the time. Well, these cords break after. I mean, remember, this is a little display. But when you're in a real office, these things are constantly just going up and down. In fact, I had to wear earplugs. It was so noisy. Imagine this times 50,000.
Yeah.
You know, this it's very noisy.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of maintenance to this. We had 12 guys working on these. They're constantly busy. They have one guy who takes care of the computer now.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, 4 times as many customers. So when I make a call and I pick up the phone, I have to hear this tone. You don't do that with your cell phone. You just dial.
Yeah.
This is telling me that I actually have a line. In fact, this switch is called a line finder.
Okay.
It's like, oh, we found a line. So you can dial. So I come off hook and I dial. That's my line finder. When I dial a 5, this switch goes up 5 and drops. Then it goes up 5 again, and it goes over till it finds the first vacant contact. So if there were 4 people talking, it would go over to the 5th one. Same thing with the second selector, and the 3rd, and the 4th. Now here, we're coming to the connector. So when I dial on the connector, watch the connector. See how it goes up 4 and it just stops?
Yeah.
So now it's waiting for me to dial the next number, and it actually goes to that number because each contact on there is actually tied to a customer.
Okay.
So, somebody want to answer the phone? Hi. You're the first person in a long time who actually said hello. Everybody picks it up and then goes. And then I always say, oh, could I have a pizza? And then they don't know what to say. No, pepperoni and mushroom.
You are saying.
Explain it? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is telegraph key and Morse code.
Okay.
Okay. Morse code was developed in 1830 as a communication. So the way this worked was there was wires strung from town to town, usually along railroad tracks because it was easier to get to. And the key uses an electromagnet. And as you depress the key, the magnet goes up and down and creates the click that you hear. And at the other end, this is called a sounding box, and this would have been at the other end of the wires, and it does the same thing. So the person at the other end can also hear the click where it goes. So the Morse code is a series of dots and dashes that represent letters. And so they would communicate by using and they would talk back and forth from town to town over the telegraph.
Okay, if you put a pause, then they will assume that it is a space between the words.
Yeah, so I'm very slow at it, so, but it goes, there's a dot and then a dash, and it's three beats for a dash compared to 1 beat for a dot. So it's dot, dash, 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 like that. So it goes dot, dash, dot, dash, as the timing for it, yeah. And so you would just go with like, so the what everyone knows, SOS, which is dot, 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 dash, 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 dot, dot, dot. And then there's a little space between each letter so you can keep track of it. And so they would talk from town to town to town. And if it was a message from Roseville, but it was supposed to go to Stockton, and all they could get was Sacramento, they would send the message to Sacramento and say, for Stockton. Then the guy in Sacramento would also send the message farther on down. And that's how they would pass the message all the way down and all the way back.
Does it is secret code?
No, it wasn't. It was when it was developed more for the railroad, and it was so that they could talk to each other to tell when the train was coming in, or if there was something wrong on the tracks, they would communicate back, and the trains could stop and hook up to the lines and listen or send a message that way if there was something going on. So it was more for the trains than anything else when it was developed. And in 1848, they made it an international code. So they made it the same for international so that everyone could use Morse code and understand it. Because before, there was one for telegraph, there was one for American Railroad, there was one for German Railroad, for India Railroad. So everyone had a different code. So then they made it all the same so it matched up for everybody. Yeah.
So this is the first one for the communication developed, right?
Yeah. Well, the only difference is the very first ones didn't have a sound. It was a little pin, and it punched paper.
Oh, okay.
And so they could read the paper and see what the code was. But then they realized that the people that were operating it could listen, and they didn't have to read it because they could hear the click from the paper punching. So then they just got rid of the paper and just used the sound. Just used it that way.
Okay. How it got converted to the actual hearing process?
How did it change over?
Yeah.
Well, they still use telegraph when the phones were working too, but they use the same type of technology. So that first one there, and so it used the same electromagnet, and it would push on that drum and create sound waves. So they went to that, and then the next one is the black cone. Tall stand-up one, and that was the first real telephone call, the voice of, on the phone.
Okay.
And that was using the waves from the inside, and it's the same principle of an electromagnet vibrating the sound. So when you speak into it, it vibrates it. It sends that signal over the DC current over the wire to another side that vibrates and makes the sound waves so that you hear them. But
thank you.
So before they had to call an operator, right? And they connected the switch.
Yes,
right?
and so that's over here.
Right. Okay.
The operator would be sitting right there, and he would pick this up and want to call somebody. So what you do is you crank that, and what that does is call this a bullseye switch, because this red dot would be the bullseye. And so that tells the operator to plug in right here, flip this to talk, and then she would talk to you and say, hi, whoops, the other way. Hi, who would you like to talk to? Well, we know it's that one because that's the only other one that works. So she would plug into that, and then she would ring that phone. And then you pick up over there. Now these phones work kinda a little bit. They're battery powered, and batteries are kind of weak right now, so they don't work great.
Okay.
But you can talk to each other then.
Wow.
But so then, when you're done, you would hang up the phone, crank it one more time, and then this little red light comes on down here and tells the operator that this phone call is done. And so she would just unplug it.
What if multiple people were making like different calls, like in the same city?
Same thing would happen. So each one of these would represent a home.
Oh,
and so this many phone calls could be happening at the same time. Now, the thing is, because if you wanted to call Auburn Auburn's not going to be on this board, so that would be a long distance phone call. In order to make a long distance phone call, you have to contact the long distance phone trunk. And so some of these would be dedicated to long distance. And so your first thing you would do would be to say, you would call the operator, and then she would plug you into the next long distance operator that could get you to a board that would then connect you to that home. Now, if that was the Midwest, you might have to go through a dozen of them to get there.
So at one point, operators are working.
Oh yeah.
Fast,
oh yeah.
Moving.
Yeah. But when this was in use, I mean, they had like maybe 150 subscribers, and so there wouldn't be a ton. There were far more people who wanted a phone than we even had phones available. It was very, very expensive to put the infrastructure in to run the wires to all the houses. So they would run the wire to one central location, and then that street would share it.
Oh.
And that was very...
So one street would share one phone?
Yeah.
Wow.
It was very common. It was very, very common.
Would it be in someone's home?
Yeah, yeah. And so all those houses would be connected. So all those homes would ring. So even when I was a kid, there was two of us. We shared with the Demuses. When our phone rang, their phone rang at the same time. And so you pick it up and listen and figure out who the call actually was for.
Or
and so that was in the
actually
60s.
Sit on the phone and listen to someone's conversation.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.